Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ruth Rajavejjabhisal. I'm the Deputy Ambassador at the British Embassy in Riga. Welcome to this session on green finance. What is green finance and how do we benefit from it? Firstly, I want to discuss the practicalities of this session. The discussion will be in English, but there is simultaneous Latvian translation. So for those of you who didn't pick up the headphones at the front of the auditorium, if you need some, please raise your hand and the LAMPA volunteers will help you. Whilst the discussion is taking place, you'll be able to ask questions on the Slido app. The password for this discussion is green with a capital G. So please ask your questions in English. Keep them coming in. We'll have a live Q&A session at the end of the discussion, and we'll seek to answer the questions that come in during that discussion. Additionally, if you feel brave enough, there is a microphone just over there in the auditorium. So for those of you here, if you would like to come up and ask a question in person, please do so. But please wait until the end. Please wait until we start the Q&A session to come up and do that. So we, the British Embassy in Riga, were keen to hold a session on green finance as we're preparing for COP26, which is the UN Climate Change Conference. This is going to be held in Glasgow in November 2021. And the United Kingdom has identified green finance as one of the government's priorities. So in 2019, the Green Finance Institute was established with the support of the British government with the aim of promoting public-private sector cooperation to increase the available funding for sustainable development. The concept of green finance is also becoming more widely recognised in Latvia. So that's part of the reason why we wanted to have this discussion today. COP26 may have been postponed due to COVID-19, but it's really important for us to keep working and keep taking action against climate change. Firstly, I'd like to thank the panellists for joining us today, and to those here in the audience and those online, and also thank you to the LAMPA festivals for putting this all together. So on the stage here with me, we have Nils Sakss, Director of the Fiscal Policy Department at the Latvian Ministry of Finance. We have Reinis Bērziņš, Chairman of the Management Board of the finance institution Altum. And we have Sanita, Bajāre, CEO of the Finance Latvia Association. And then on the screen, joining us from London, we have Gavin Templeton, Head of the Sustainable Finance Green Investment Group. And we have Iskander Erzini Vernoit, Policy Advisor at the climate change think tank E3G. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. So I think the main things that I wanted to cover in today's discussion are, what is green finance? Can we find a definition for it? Can we define it a bit more closely? And what has been done so far in both the UK and in Latvia. So it'd be good to get a sense from both perspectives what green finance is. How can people benefit from green finance? I think that's a really important question. What does green finance mean to the general public? And what can people get out of this? What sort of projects can we do using green finance? So I'm hoping that Reinis will be able to cover some of that later in the discussion. And how can, I think more importantly, as we're sitting here with COVID-19, this is being done very differently to previous years. So, I think a key thing is, how can green finance contribute to the recovery from COVID-19? We've heard a lot about recovery from COVID-19 from various governments, but how can we be greener, in this recovery? And does green finance have a role in that? And then finally, what is the way forward? Are there risks? Are there lessons learned? Things that we should consider going forward. So I'd like now to turn to Gavin. That was an awful lot of questions, and I hope we have time to cover that. So I'd like to now turn to Gavin and ask him to introduce himself. Tell us a bit more about his organisation and the work that you've done on green finance so far, and then I'll invite the other panellists to do the same. But the first question I put to you, Gavin, is how would you define green finance in general and also from a UK perspective? So over to you.
Thanks. I hope you can all hear me, and apologies for that I'm not able to be there in person. First, I'd like to thank
Ruth and colleagues at the British Embassy, as well as those organising the LAMPA Festival, for the invitation to speak. As was mentioned, my name is Gavin Templeton, Head of Sustainable Finance at the Green Investment Group. We were actually formerly called the Green Investment Bank, So the Green Investment Bank was set up by the UK government in 2012 as the world's first dedicated green finance institution, which had a mission to accelerate the low carbon transition in the UK. In 2017, the organisation was sold to Macquarie Group, who are the world's largest infrastructure investor. And my role here is advising governments globally on the low carbon transition. And I think, in answer to that question, what is green finance? Obviously, there's been a lot of thinking in the UK. And I think the most useful framing that I found is the framing that's come from the Green Finance Strategy, which the UK government launched in summer 2019. And it breaks it down, the concept of green finance, into three core elements. And probably the first two are the most important. The first of those, being greening finance. And what do we mean by greening finance? Well, ensuring that current and future financial risks, as well as opportunities from climate and environmental factors, are integrated into mainstream financial decision-making. And also that green financial products are robust. So what does that mean? Well, it means when you're buying something that it says that it's green, that there's some proof that it has a positive environmental impact or is contributing to the low carbon transition. The second part is financing green. And I suppose that's a bit more easy to understand. That's accelerating investment into the provision of projects and, with environmental outcomes. Delivery of carbon targets and green growth at the core, and also supporting international policy perspectives. And I guess the overlapping point of this from the UK perspective, which is probably going to be important anywhere you go, including Latvia, is being able to capture that opportunity, because a lot of what is going to happen on the back of global targets and this challenge of meeting the low carbon transition is going to result in the development of new commercial opportunities, whether it's the provision of data and analytics when you're thinking about greening finance, or whether it's the development of new green financial products and services when you're talking about financing green. So hopefully that starts to frame some of the discussion, and I'll just pause there.
That's great. Thank you very much, Gavin. So actually, I'd like to turn to Nils now and get a sense of, from you, how does it feel in Latvia? What does green finance mean out here?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, you and British Embassy for organizing this, and of course, LAMPA participants, organizers. So the green financing is quite new term, and probably different people, even in the ministry, have a slightly different view. So I can just explain my story, how I see it. First of all, what is the aim? The aim is to finance green projects, green business, and so on and so on. So then we have two envelopes of money, so to say, private and public. But for the investment, public money is about 20% only. 80% are private investments. So where companies get the money? So probably the simple answer is they borrow it from the banks, or maybe injecting the equity. And if it's 80%, the very key issue is that this money is going to the green businesses, to green projects. That is a challenge, how to get to that point. But this is also the one of the aims. So the other aim is that climate change, irrespective whether the money go to green or brown projects, that creates additional challenge for the banks, because they have to assess the business viability of business projects, whether they will get the money back. And here the question is how climate will influence the business of that company. And there again, there are two elements here. The one is natural catastrophes, what can happen because of the climate change. And the other is what the governments are going to do to get to the climate neutrality in 2050, what the policy change will be. Maybe now the business looks very nice, but then suddenly government say, oh, that's very bad, and we are now going to change regulation. As a result, business go down, and the bank should envisage this. So the question is how banks know what the government intend to do. So, and then the third element, so that's why the second is this risk analysis, and it goes very in line what in UK in the strategy is the greening of finance. And then I think there will be change of the philosophy that the investors who have money and are willing to put the money and to buy different assets, for them, it will be important where this money goes. Does it go to the green or not green? So, and here we arrive to the need to track information, where the money is going. So each transfer of money should bring some passport where it's going. What are the results of that? And the investor, they should know before they decide whether to invest or not. And this third element is information. We need information. So then, from the label point of view, we, to lesser extent, talking about green finance, we more talk about sustainable finance. What is sustainable finance? The one part is social elements, because all the UN development targets. So, okay, that's important, but in my view, we still can put it a little bit aside. Then we arrive to environment. Again, in the environment, there are many challenges. I think we should focus to the most important and urgent, and that is climate change. And then we arrive to climate change. There are two actually challenges. The one is mitigation to avoid pollution, and the second is adaptation, because unavoidably the climate will change, even if, to a lesser extent if we make an effort. So briefly, these are the main elements which we put together and say sustainable finance or green finance. For the public, I said, for me, the private is most important, but we can also discuss about our plans about public funds for climate.
Great, thank you very much. Sanita.
Yeah, hello. Thank you so much for introductory remarks, and I fully agree what was said just by Nils, giving some kind of perspective. What are we talking when we are mentioning green finance? And from my point, I also would like to share my definition, because at some point green finance is something new for us, but it's not so new if we are looking, for example, on experience of Nordic countries. They started to issue green bonds in 2007, 2008. It's more than 10 years ago, and they have managed really to shape their loan portfolios towards green part of these loans. It's almost half of their portfolios we now can really call green. And talking about definition, I would say that green, why green is sustainable at the same time? Because talking about green finance, we are talking about sustainable projects, about climate neutral projects, about projects we can define those green loans in categories like renewable energy, like energy efficiency, green buildings, like clean transportation, waste management, so many different kind of projects. But all these projects are with one aim, really, to develop sustainable economy. economy. And it's about sustainable growth, because we are not talking about some kind of aim, some kind of separate aim out of a whole, let's say, box of different aims. We are talking about sustainable economy growth. And I would say that green finance and green sustainable development, it's a key, talking about all these very important things. Thank you.
Thank you. And Reinis, what's your definition of green finance?
I guess, first of all, thank you, British Embassy here in Latvia, and also organizers of LAMPA for being here and having this great possibility also to share our experience. And I guess I will share not so much about definitions, right, because they're already been said quite enough, which I can totally agree. But from our perspective, we would like from Altum just show some of those projects where we have launched basically finances which you can call green, right? And I have very short presentation. I hope you will see that. So basically in the first slide you can see two sides. The first is that there, of course, I don't know, already like 5 years ago we understood that basically green projects are here to stay. This green vector will be here to stay, and we can see also it nowadays after those couple of years. And what we did, we basically made a program which is the first one in Central and Eastern Europe, which was green bonds issued by the development institution, finance development institutions. So we were the first one. Our targets were like all those green projects we already have discussed also in this session, and of course like green cars, like renewables, greenhouses. You can see also here in this slide different type of project where you just can measure real energy efficiency. We went to the capital markets. In other audiences, which is more connected with finances, I'm very proud about that story we did out that year. It was 2017. We got the Moody's rating, which is the highest among Latvian state institutions, Baa1. We still have that rating, which we are proud of. Then we went to the capital markets. We were second after Latvian Ergo, who issued bonds. And for the first time for us, as I said, we did it with the green bonds. We had very great interest from investors. Our books were full more than 6 times. So basically we could issue more and more. But what we did, we made this pilot project. And now we are here and actually can show just 2 or 3 slides about examples where the money have been launched. Here you can see the first example. You can see this is the actually very tiny municipality. You can see Milskalna, it's in the district of Angure. There is something like approximately only 600 people living there. And they just changed the heating system for that very small municipality. This current system costs something actually below 200,000 euros. You can see the sparing per year. It's almost 50,000 euros. Again, of course, it depends of how warm or how cold is the winter, right? And this winter was very cold, and of course those numbers can change, but in average, you can see that actually it takes something like 4 to 5 years for our projects, and they actually pays back, right? So this is one example. For example, this machinery, it's operated, you just need 1 or 2 employees comparing with several when you had this old school machinery. So this is like one example. This is more like minor thing. Then we can go to one of those, again, I would like to say our proud story, because there is a lot of talks also in Latvia how we need to support those companies who deal basically with ESCO business. And I guess not everyone is familiar with ESCO, but basically those are the companies like operator goes where there is a big possibility to have energy efficiency. They, for example, this particular one is RCG Lighthouse. They work by basically switching lighting systems, for example, to trivial example, LED lighting system. And you can see also those names. And I guess those who are here now also from Latvian audience, they, I guess, know all of those samples. Lido, Kurši, Madara, Jusk, Loma, you can name. All of those actually are in portfolio of RCG Lighthouse. They have now more than 100 clients. Something like 35 are also abroad in Baltics, in Estonia and Lithuania. And actually they got this also loan, and could basically what they could do with those green finances could faster, launch their power to more clients, right? Because they also, when they do their great job, they have basically also not so big possibilities to go every place in the same time, right? So they were also the ones who got credit from our program, right? This is another example, and here already those money, these finances were actually granted in a broader sense. It was more like €1 million project, and then we got another portion there. And now I guess the third, and for this time it's like a last one, this is a project called Fiscal. It happened actually in July, very recently. It was full Dome Square. We are also located in Dome Square, so I guess everyone also in Latvia knows that there is a quite enough space to have a lot of cars. This time those were electro cars, more than 100, and we can see that actually in Latvia, with this deal, there were more for 13% for one deal electro cars here in Latvia, because again, this is a market which will develop in upcoming years, I'm sure about that, but we are very proud that we are the finance institution, because we don't compete with the banks. We do this job, which is basically now we need to be like very often we need to be the first one, right? And it will develop in upcoming years, I'm sure about that. But for this project, and this is not a secret, we granted a loan in amount of €2.4 million. And you can see right here, it's a 13% for this market. So I guess I could talk more and more, but those pictures speak quite clear and loud, right? So thanks.
That's great, thank you. Well, maybe we can go into detail with some more of this later. And Iskander, who's been waiting very patiently, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what you think about green finance?
Thank you. The pictures do indeed speak loud and clear, I think. So, yeah, thank you to colleagues at the UK Embassy and the broader UK diplomatic network for the invitation. And thank you to the organisers of this festival for putting the event together. So to introduce myself briefly, my name is Iskander Erzini. I work for E3G, which is an independent, not-for-profit think tank focused on climate change. And we have a specialism in the politics and the diplomacy of climate change, and that includes on areas such as green finance. And in the past 10 years or so, we've been quite active in the UK context around the subject of green finance. Gavin mentioned the Green Investment Bank in the United Kingdom, which was a policy story that E3G was quite intimately involved with from the outset over 10 years ago now, and is also involved in parallel conversations around a possible UK National Investment Bank today. So I think I'd echo in terms of talking about definitions of green finance, the distinction between, on the one hand, financing green, and then on the other hand, greening finance, which is, as Gavin mentioned, embodied in the UK's green finance strategy. Obviously, definitions differ, and I don't think we have the time to go into a full appraisal of the differences between green finance, sustainable finance, and indeed, a lot of governments are doing a lot of work on taxonomies in this space today. But I would echo some of the points made previously by my fellow panelists. I think that, as my esteemed fellow panelist from the Ministry of Finance was pointing out, there's in terms of greening finance, an important pillar being the top topic of risk management, both around physical risks from the impacts of climate change, which are severe and growing, but also transition risks, which can include the impacts on a company's business operations as a result of regulatory changes. And in the greening of finance sort of category more largely, I think that that is the area where you can have a conversation about the need to reorient capital flows essentially toward objectives that are consistent with the Paris Agreement and Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement, and a sort of do no harm objective. In terms of financing green, I think, you know, in global terms, you know, you can point to the Paris Agreement as well, in the sense that, you know, there's all these national stories about green finance that are being played out in countries around the world today, but it's important to keep it in global perspective, because I think, you know, insofar as green finance has a purpose around, you know, tackling that most serious environmental problem of climate change, there is a distinct task of scaling the financing of green, particularly green infrastructure and green technology on the order of trillions of dollars per annum on a global basis. And so it's very heartening to see the great work being done by my fellow panelist from the Latvian Development Bank, where it looks like work is already well underway on the financing green agenda. And I'm sure there's lots more to be done and lots more to talk about in that regard. So I'm excited to be here and excited to continue the conversation. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. I mean, I think the things that I've been hearing are what seems to be key is having a green finance strategy. So I think setting out what you need to do. That sounds like, you know, I don't know if there is one in Latvia. Maybe you could elaborate. But I think that other things like so green finance is things like green bonds, sustainable projects. We've seen some really, really good examples from Altum on sort of sustainable things or renewable energy, waste management. I do like the cars, the electronic cars. But I think a question about that, which could be a whole other topic, is, you know, is the infrastructure there? You know, if you're charging an electric car in Latvia, you know, is there a place to do so? But I think that's another discussion altogether. But I think what I mean, thank you very much to everybody for explaining the definition. I think it is a very broad topic, and that there is an awful lot in there. But I think, and we've seen some of the examples already. But I think what I'd like to discuss now is what are the practical benefits of green finance for citizens. So we've seen some of these heating systems, but that's a municipality system. So, you know, what can the individual person on the street do, and what can they get? What benefits can they get from green finance? So I'm going to open that up.
I guess I can start.
Yeah.
Actually, as a station, we really are working on these topics. And at the very beginning of this year, we has endorsed a position regarding sustainable finance. And we believe that actually really building competence and raising awareness, it's a key. It's very crucial. Starting to work on the things, and it was really mentioned before that that we need to really concentrate on data availability, because without data we do not have any kind of capability somehow to evaluate those risks. We need to agree on data, and we need to start to collect data. When we agree that data, or we have some kind of set of data, we can start somehow to evaluate risks, and knowledge and awareness and understanding about ESG, environmental, social, governance risks. It's the next very important step. And third, point, when you have the data, some kind of taxonomy, and you have this risk evaluation matrix, you can somehow build up products and start to offer your clients and start to somehow to build awareness and to build understanding from their point of view. Is it important for me as a customer, as a person, just to look maybe a little further, because we need to remember that economic, environmental, and social profitability, it's measured on a long term. It's not like you can really feel it in your pocket today. You are investing for the future, and sometimes we need really to do a bunch of different actions to unlock sustainable future. And talking about some kind of practicalities, we have quite a number of different projects, and I have mentioned I would say the most popular directions now we are thinking about. It's regarding energy efficiency. It's about clean transportation, like green leasings, like these kind of projects, and we are talking about sustainable waste management, all the things like waste of energy, and how really to decrease the impact footprint on our environment. I would say that in many cases it's like trying to explain those future benefits and trying to access all life cycle of the project, because as lenders, as banks, and Nils has mentioned that it's a large majority of all resources comes from banks, capital markets, and here in Latvia, particularly from banks, from lending, we need to really feel our responsibility as lenders from origination of each particular deal until it's repaid by customer, and therefore I would say that we are working pretty hard. And again, to repeat all these very important things, I would say building competence and raising awareness, it's very timely and it's very important.
So Gavin, I'm going to turn to you because you're right on my screen, right in front of me. How does it look from the UK?
Well, I guess two things that I would mention here. The first is jobs. So basically, what we're talking about is the jobs of the future, the jobs that are going to endure, the jobs that are possible for countries to start to set themselves up for now. There's been quite a lot of work done in the UK on areas like building, retrofitting, and energy efficiency. So energy efficiency is a no-brainer. It's free, saves energy, saves money, and helps reposition the housing stock and commercial real estate for the future. And it also generates lots of jobs. And I guess in this post-COVID world, that's exactly the sort of thing that governments should be trying to encourage. So jobs is definitely one part of that. Not least jobs in renewable energy development, and sustainable transportation development, and sustainable water development, waste management was also mentioned, which we're very big in. We're actually involved in trying to develop some sort of green apprenticeship scheme to think about what role we can play to help educate some of the green employees of the future. And the second thing to think about, maybe as well as the government's thinking about this, is investment. International investors are whose capital is mobile, are looking for green investment opportunities. They don't want to invest in fossil fuels anymore. Fossil fuels are looking riskier and riskier by the day. Lots of development finance institutions and private banks are announcing they're getting out of coal for that financing predominantly. But there's lots of investors who want to invest in green. I think it's, from our perspective, we are the largest infrastructure globally, and the one area which has not slowed down in the COVID crisis is green infrastructure. It is expanding rapidly, and lots of investors want to invest in it. So for governments being able to put in place policies and create the right sort of environment to, for investors, private investors, to play a role you will become a destination. We are seeing increased competition from countries as they want to become destinations for green investments. So, that in itself will create jobs and prosperity for people. So, from my perspective, why would you do it? Well, jobs and investment are two of the main reasons.
That's great, thank you. And Reinis, do you want to come in?
Yeah, also like to comment something which is actually beyond this only good things for environment, right? If I just showed several of those pictures, let's just have a small analysis. The first one, what does it benefit? Not only, as I said, good for environment, but sparing for such a small municipality, 45,000 euros, as I said, very small, few hundreds of people right here. So this particular machinery, either there works 6 or 7 employees or 2, it makes a difference, right? Because they spare. This is also how to spare this automation. Again, we are talking a lot about automation, but how much do you have projects here in municipalities who do this nowadays? Not so many. So this is one way how to go further with smaller expenditures. And actually it also means possibility to lower the costs for this heating system for people right there. It's the first thing. The second project, ESCO company, which I also introduced, right? How works ESCO companies? Basically, as I said, they are operator companies. They go for any of those good labels I showed. They just showed, for example, you have a big building when there is a lot of not so efficient lighting system. They said, look, we can change that for our money, and you will spare after those couple of years, because for, let's say, 5 years, you will have to pay this spared money for us, because then we will get our capex back, which we put in your company, as well as have a small profit, right? Simple as it is. What is the real life? When they do several of those projects, afterwards there's a great possibility to choke with their cash flow for a capex, right? Because they have launched that money, and if they don't have a possibility to have additional finances, they have to sit there, and only few projects will be done during those years. With this money, because how we provide this kind of loan, there is smaller need for collateral. And very often, only collateral what we have as a bank, basically we work as a bank, not competing with the banks, but the principles are very similar, because we are also looking on risks, on collateral and so on. What we do here, we are measuring also energy efficiency, and if it's enough for energy efficiency, we can provide this loan with the small or actually no collateral at all. This is the second thing. Meanwhile, in those 5 years, RCG Lighthouse can go to more and more good companies to do those great things. This is the second example. And the third example, I guess it speaks about itself, right? At the one moment to finance 100 cars, which is like 13%, and everyone knows what is electro cars, why it's needed, how bad is other types of driving cars. I also drive a usual car, but in Altum we already now have for several years also electro car. Of course, I will not lie. At the beginning, our also employees smiled and so on. But for example, I wanted to come to LAMPA, and this car already was booked, right? So it is quite popular also in our company, and most likely we will buy more and more. So I guess this is just the way we need to go with the projects like that. Only the boost those scopes, and this is the way. This is upcoming years, in my opinion. Yeah.
Great. I think just going back to one of the things that Sanita was saying was about raising awareness. And I think, as you say, you sort of laughed when Altum got these electric cars, but now you can't book one, there aren't any available. So it is about a little bit about changing mindsets, people thinking about what green finance actually can do for them and where they can benefit from it. But going back to the raising awareness point, what has the Ministry of Finance been doing here in Latvia? Is there anything that they've been doing to raise awareness of green finance, or?
Yeah, so awareness is really, I agree with Sanita, one of the key elements. And coming back to the issue, what the green finance give for the people, I think good projects, saving money, yeah, that's good. If you give money, particularly public funds, in heating economy, that creates jobs. That's also good. But there is no only sunshine here, because so there will be loss of jobs because of the brown economy. So there is a transfer of jobs and skills and all that. It's not only, in my view, creation. Then there is also cost for the society. It's not just something which is only good. I think the key element here is that we have to save our planet, and everybody should make an effort, and also that incurs costs, either financial or behavior change. We have to be ready to change our behavior, and the people who will discover that they have to change, they will not be happy, because they like to do as this. So this is not only, I think, about good projects saving energy and bills. That's absolutely correct, and that's, I think, is good. But to reach neutrality, that will incur quite high costs for everybody. I think the awareness, and now we come back what you said, that people should accept that. And this is a matter of awareness. And that goes to both situations, because investors which have money, they want profits. It's a market, it's profit. And then you ask, okay, the profit is one thing, but are you ready just to maybe take higher risk, but put money in the green? We can ask, are green assets perform better than the rest? Currently, my understanding that's approximately the same, because the risk is to finance brown, but the risk is also to finance innovative products, because we don't know how these new green projects will go out. And here I think the question is about, and that is one of the policies we're thinking in the Ministry of Finance, the cooperation between the commercial, the market participants, and the government funds. And the Altum, maybe together with a commercial bank, could launch the new products where there is certain guarantees against these potential risks which come from these higher risk of going into the innovation. The other, I think, question, which is the guiding principle for us, are we want to be champions here? Because my single answer is we are the members of the European Union. And I can just devote some time to talk about taxonomy regulation, the information disclosure. I could say there is already good legislation in place, and this is applicable directly to Latvia. The question here is how we implement that, because if it's just formality, that will not work. We should have our sense of ownership in the implementation of these regulations. And the question is about, are we going to put on top of that, something extra national to make that we will be higher champions than the average in the European Union? So our view here is that we are more going to support by drafting guidelines, organizing information sharing support, rather than putting additional national rules. There is a part which is unavoidable, because under all these taxonomies there will be delegated acts, and delegated acts will say countries should do this and decide who will be responsible for that and what the penalties framework will be. Of course, we will need something, but to be the champions and going on top of that. So our, I think, good privilege here is that we have this common European Union regulation, and we should make maximum efficient way how we implement that, and the opportunity which comes from that. Then I think what is also from the Ministries of Finance point of view, as Sanita said, we need the information, but we need clarity about government's policy. How banks would know what is risky in the future if not? Okay, simply we say everything which pollutes, which emits more than average, it's bad, and sooner or later this will be discontinued. But we need more clarity in the roadmap, what kind of government decisions will be made, what restrictions will be imposed with a view to reach the neutrality. And okay, it's easy to say, it's difficult to get, we never be absolutely clear. But at least from the Ministry of Finance point of view, I think we will work together with Ministry of Environment to get as much as possible advance in this clarity about the change of the regulations. Because for banks, it's very vital. And then, again, this is the preliminary view from our ministry. We believe to market mechanisms. And instead imposing specific, oh, you now should invest only to the green and you will have to pay, I don't know, some fee if you're not using that. Instead of that, we should integrate carbon pricing in any activity. Again, it's easy to say, it's difficult to get because somebody will suffer and we need compensation mechanism not to make a big fiscal shock on that. But we need to understand that all businesses, all activities also incur cost if they pollute. And so this carbon pricing, I think, is one of the cornerstones. And then for the assessing the business projects viability, if you put that expenditure, it already will be visible, which is profitable and which is not. So we're preparing the draft financial development plan for the coming years, and this will be one of the topics. So everything is new. Also, the regulations will have to be applied from the middle of the next year. So we are very at the initial phase, and that's why we should really reflect and to find what are the key actions and priorities here.
Yeah. So I think I'm actually just I'm very conscious of time, and I'd like us to have a Q&A session and bring some of the audience. And there's actually some really good questions coming in already. And I think one of them, which has struck me, is, so given the urgency of climate change, why do banks and public finance institutions even consider and allow funding non-green or black or brown projects? So I think that was something that you were sort of touching on slightly there. So should we, would you like to come in, Reinis?
I actually just wanted to, before that, just a small remarks. As also Sanita said, awareness is one of the name of the game, basically. Also now it's kind of success story, but the beginning was very hard, actually, because I guess first half of the year we just were, every second seminar we made, it was somehow connected with this program, right? To raise the pool where we could choose those good projects. This is one thing, and I can totally agree with you. And also, I guess, very good point raised Nils about all those projects and risks, which also those green projects had. And I can just give our, like how to say, our story. It's like we currently have 40 clients here. And smaller, bigger, but in average it's like something like €500,000 for the loan, a bit less. But what we have quite good discipline from those 40 clients, none of them have defaulted, none, which is good during those years. And only 2 have the problems with some kind of postponement of those principal amount payment, right? Which is very, very good, and it's above average because, as I said, this is a program where we don't have a collateral. Or collateral, being more precise, collateral is the future cash flow of energo efficiency, right? So, or some other assets, but this could be like the main of those. So actually you can manage that if you just try to understand when there is no just talks, because we would like to get finance and, I don't know, finance something green, but where you can see. And I guess if someone could raise the question, why it's so, I would like to answer. Those companies usually had smarter management. Simple as it is. They really are looking in the upcoming years. They are more sustainable, and this is one of the answers, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. And Gavin, Iskander, what's your opinion?
So, I mean, ultimately the transition has to be an orderly one and not a disorderly one. If banks stop financing everything that's not green, then you have a disorderly transition. And again, the gentleman from the Ministry of Finance mentioned, the concept of the just transition. We need to ensure that the quality jobs that we create can replace, some of the jobs that are no longer going to exist. And obviously, there are shades of green and there are shades of brown. And there's a path to net zero in 2050. And frankly, the mapping of what industries work at what point is still in its infancy. So it's actually not even feasible for banks in every single case to understand exactly what is going to meet the transition, because it's a path. And again, as I mentioned, a transition, a good example is what we're doing in Scotland with the oil and gas industry. That a lot of the people who worked in the oil and gas industry are now working in developing offshore wind, because a lot of the skills are transferable. And that's where banks can continue, because they can continue to finance those companies. So there are examples of good transition that are happening. It is top of people's minds in the UK, this concept of the just transition. We can't leave anyone behind because there's going to be such great opportunity. But yeah, we need to make sure it's orderly and not disorderly, any transition. Thank you.
Iskander, do you have a view?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the question from the audience about investment in fossil fuels by banks, I think sort of comes back to your earlier point about what's in green finance for citizens. And I think that there's this growing and rightful expectation among citizens of the public that the retail banks that they have deposits in would not be supporting the fossil fuel economy that is endangering the livelihoods of future generations. I think what's interesting is, as Gavin says, I think you do have a fair amount of debate which is yet to be resolved in different institutions and in different markets about specifically what needs to be ended and when and under what circumstances. And I think it's very heartening to see a lot of the public and development banks, as I think was alluded to earlier, moving first in that respect to decide that as sort of principal purveyors of public capital, that they're not using their capital towards investment in fossil fuels. I think the private banking sector is in some respects playing catch up, but I think that we have a lot to see over the coming 12 months. And in the run up to COP26, it's very interesting to see that we have growing expectations in this space. You have the special advisor on COP26 and finance, the former governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, who has set forward expectations for commitments that can be made by private financial firms, including banks, with respect to climate change, in terms of what would constitute leadership that could be brought to COP26. And we're seeing an emerging norm there around net zero in lending portfolios. And I think that in terms of the sort of transition plan to affect the sort of orderly transition that Gavin spoke of earlier, you need to have a pretty detailed plan for what's going to happen in the short, immediate and medium term in order to realize those net zero targets. And I think that, that's where there's scope for conversations about phasing out fossil fuels within the coming years.
That's great, thank you. So I think you've almost answered one of the other questions that I have here is, what has the UK achieved on green finance so far? Can the UK speakers give some examples? But I think you've kind of covered that in the sense that, we're trying not, in the UK, we're trying not to finance any more fossil fuel type projects, those sorts of things. So I think you're almost there, unless there's any other examples that you think you'd like to give. No. Okay. Oh, Gavin, I think you're talking, but we can't hear you.
So yeah, one example, probably a little bit of a fact. I think the UK grid was running without coal it was a period of months. And again, given that the UK was running on coal, as part, right from the early stages of the Industrial Revolution, we've shown that, with investment and alignment between policy and finance, this sort of thing can happen very, very quickly. A matter of years that we've seen coal pushed to the very margins in the UK. So again, no reason why that can't be done elsewhere.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. So I'm very conscious of the time. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I wanted to do quick reflections on this session and the key things that have come out. So I think for me, it's a bit of a slow transition. I mean, I think it's something that we should be doing. I like the idea of moving to just green funding as opposed to funding brown and black, but I agree that, that just isn't possible. But I think what somebody said earlier was it's investing for the future, and we need to explain the future benefit to people. And we're seeing some really concrete projects here in Latvia and some really concrete projects in the UK. And I think, with COP26 coming up, it's something that's really, really key for us in the UK, and to keep taking action on climate change. But I'm going to go to each of the speakers just to get one final reflection from each of you. So, Sanita, would you like to start us off?
Yes, thank you. I would like we agree that building awareness, it's a key. I would like just to point one other thing. I guess green finance and sustainable development, it's about cooperation. It's about cooperation at all respects between commercial banks, with development bank, with policymakers. We need really to agree on those actions we need to do today just to unlock our sustainable future. And it's about cooperation. It's about data and data sharing and building maybe some kind of platforms, not building walls or some kind of restrictions. And I fully believe that as a small open economy, we are quite successful. We are small, fast, and we can talk to each other. And therefore, I'm a big optimist, and I really believe that we will succeed in building our sustainable future and economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Reinis?
Yeah, for me, just one remark. With Fiscal project, with that car project, we basically launched the money coming from bonds, and that was that. So basically, the money from that year is ended. But we have good news for those who are now also interested. We basically signed agreement now with EIB that we are continuing this program, which is a very good sign because they also believe basically in the green projects, but also they need to be sustainable. So everything will continue. I hope in actually broader scope, right? So. Thanks.
Oh, we didn't have a chance to talk about the public finance and COVID, but let me in this last minute to cover it. So the public funds annually goes in the investment about 1 billion. That is the total. The biggest part comes from the structural funds. We put the co-financing. And then on top of that, now we will have this RRF, Resilience Recovery Facility, which in total are 2 billion. Approximately the majority should be spent in 2 years. And half of that should go to the climate change and digital. For us, Latvia, that is a very significant public funds which are just tied to the climate goals. This is a big opportunity, and really the challenge is to get a good project pipeline for support. And then I ask myself, what does it mean for green financing from banks? I think if we create green public infrastructure, that will create precondition for better funding projects for the private companies. So this will be certain catalyzer also for the private funds. And I think this is a very big opportunity for Latvia, and then I think we should work hard in really getting that this money is used efficiently.
Great, thank you. And Gavin, final words?
So final words, if I had to give some advice to our friends in Latvia, one of the big catalysts which actually resulted in the development of the Green Finance Strategy was the Green Finance Initiative, which was set up by the City of London Corporation, bringing together the UK government, bringing together think tanks, consultants, investors, stock exchanges, central banks, every stakeholder who was interested in green finance to develop a dialogue to have a better understanding on the route that we wanted to take together. And I would encourage that. I certainly think I'm going to put something back on Ruth. The British Embassy could certainly help because they could talk to colleagues in London about how that process worked, because it was mentioned by a couple of other speakers that collaboration and cooperation between public and private is essential, because there's not enough public money. There's even less public money now because of the response to COVID. So encourage that dialogue, encourage that cooperation, and you've got a bright future.
Thank you. And Iskander?
Thank you. So in closing, I'd say cooperation is absolutely key. So is innovation, but so is courage and the need to think outside the box. I think I'd be adamant that there's a growing consensus that we need to shift from unsustainable investments to sustainable investments, and to do so on very short order, given the urgency of the moment. Here in the UK, the Parliament declared a climate emergency last summer. And I think that, this is underway. It's not as if it's not possible. It is possible. The world's largest multilateral development bank, the European Investment Bank, the EIB, as mentioned earlier, decided to phase out investments in fossil fuels last year. And the hope is that many more institutions will follow. But once again, it will take cooperation across stakeholders, as Gavin was saying. It will take innovation, and it will take courage.
Great, thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of today's session. I think the things that have come out for me, the key words are awareness, raising awareness, cooperation. That seems to be, a key thing, that to cooperate public, private sector, governments, institutions, that sort of thing. And I think one of the things that struck me that you said, Sanita, was taking action today, but then actually we need to explain the benefits for the future. And there's big opportunities out there, and creating green public infrastructure will increase the conditions for private investment. So I think that those are really key things. So I think all that remains for me is to say thank you very much to everybody who's listening in here in the auditorium and online, and thank you very much again to the speakers and to LAMPA. So thank you.